studied and brought up the CIO from Washington State that looked at dispatch centers. And the biggest thing that the consultant out of Wasilla, or out of Washington told us is the biggest mistake he ever made was not consolidating regionally. He should have consolidated even bigger than that. You can handle 735,000 subscriber calls with 25 employees with one dispatch center, which means we don't need 3 or 4 dispatch centers separate for fire and safety and police. And our public safety people need to work together. I think there's lots of cooperation and savings there. Wasilla Dispatch does all the dispatch for the state troopers, while the Mat-Su Borough has its own dispatch for public safety, or for fire and ambulance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colligan. My apologies on getting the names mixed up there. Steve Colligan, Assembly candidate for Mat-Su Borough. We'll now move on to a different question. We'll start with Mr. Darcy Salmon for this question. Mr. Salmon, some would say that the port is stalled. We have done a lot of infrastructure work at the port, but we have done very little to attract new business to the port. As a matter of fact, we've even scared some businesses away. How, as an Assembly member, would you handle bringing new business to the port?
Well, I think one of the biggest things of any industry, and I am an entrepreneur by trade, is marketing. You have to market it. Your mayor has claimed that the Mat-Su Borough is open for business. I believe him. I supported him in getting his seat, and we now have a new manager, Mr. Moosey, and I've listened to him speak numerous times, and I believe that he's interested in facilitating that same agenda. And why we don't have production at the port is because it hasn't been pushed. It hasn't. Mark Van Dongen bangs his head against the wall, aching for the borough to step forward and help him. He speaks about the debacle on the Anchorage side with their port, and if only we'd had $100 million of their dollars over here, we would be the state-of-the-art top #1 port in the entire state of Alaska, but we don't have it. So you need an assembly member, if you will, such as myself, that's intricately involved in that port and is going to push it for all we're worth, and have the borough behind me 100% in that respect, I believe, once we're all finally seated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darcy Salmon. The same question for you, Mr. Steve Colligan. How do we attract new business to Port McKenzie?
Number one is by government partnering with business. We need to have decent regulations that allow business to succeed in that area. We need the same directives and goals, and we need to basically create an environment where people are interested in developing out there. And we need to make resources available to develop, to make sure that things are rolling on the port and off the port. On and off that belt is how that makes money. And up until the last couple of years, that has not happened. We need to continue to work together, to partner together, to be successful.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colligan. Now, Mr. Pat Johnson, the same question for you, sir. How do we attract new business to Port McKenzie?
Thank you. The port is finally coming into its own. Pardon me. And the key to that is the rail extension going from the port to Houston. While I was working on the Planning Commission, we did help the port in making changes to their special use district, and I voted for the rail extension to Houston. I think that one of the things that we can do, and that the port is looking for, is bringing in resources from Fairbanks area, and that would include limestone and maybe even cement manufactured in Fairbanks. And I think that the port will attract businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. We can now move on to a new question. We'll start with Mr. Steve Colligan on this one, since we started with Mr. Salmon last. Mr. Colligan and other Assembly candidates, it seems that our Goose Creek Correctional Facility has run into a little bit of political trouble here. How do we move forward with Goose Creek? We've got a tremendous investment out there. The borough is hugely invested in the prison. How are we going to get that to move forward and get that open?
Well, I'm very familiar with politics and very familiar with Goose Creek. There was plenty of political theater in Juneau this last year, and it was basically political theater. It was exactly that. At the end of the day, our legislators fought hard to get the $3 million to start opening up and a phased opening for that Goose Creek Correctional Facility. It's opening. but it's not going to have 1,500 inmates at once. They're going to start with a small group, test out the system, test out the facilities, and then move forward the next legislative year with more until it's finally full. And yes, it's not as cheap as lower 48, but they're local jobs, local inmates, and there's other advantages to having that facility. But it is opening, and there was plenty of political theater, and it's too bad that it happens that way, but that's just politics.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colligan. Mr. Johnson, same question for you, sir. How are we going to move forward with Goose Creek Correctional Facility?
I think that the first thing we need to do is get an audit done. And then I think we need to look at the recommendations of that audit. We need those 700 jobs move forward now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Darcy Salmon, same question for you, sir. How are we going to move forward with Goose Creek Correctional Facility?
Well, I think this phone, okay, here we are. My thoughts go back to many projects that the state has involved itself in, and they start something, they move forward, and then they seem to stop mainstream and nothing ever gets done. Again, this is in my district, so I'm very partial to having it open and creating, with the bridge and the rail spur and the port, this new city that's called Point McKenzie. It will exist, it'll exist in most of your lifetime. That prison will be an integral economic wheel that drives that, so you have to suck it up and open the thing and realize that no business makes money the first year, the second year, maybe even 5 years before Dun & Bradstreet will make you eligible to borrow money, but you will fill that prison. As surely as we're gaining students, we're gaining prisoners, and it's natural that we will locate them there, and it'll be a quality operation, and I'm looking forward to it. Soft opening, as well as I'm looking forward to what results as a result of that business there.
Thank you very much, Darcy Salmon. Thank you all candidates for your open and honest answers. As long as we're talking about the Point McKenzie area, there are obviously a couple of issues that we're dealing with. We've got the Kinnick Arm Crossing, which is people keep saying they're in favor of it, but we keep getting sued and keep running into roadblocks on the other side of the crossing there. We also have the ferry running back and forth. We're ready on our side, they're not ready on their side. We seem to be having some trouble getting along with Anchorage is one of the perceptions that the frontiersman is putting forward. So how are you as a candidate, and we'll start with Mr. Johnson here, how are you as a candidate going to work with Anchorage to help solve these problems, to get the Kinnick Arm Crossing going and to get the ferry in operation?
Thank you. I think Janet's doing a wonderful job, as was mentioned earlier, on the Kabata board. The ferry is another problem. Soon after one of us or two of us get on the assembly, we're going to be dealing with $1,700,000 a year maintenance on that ferry. We need to get it working. We need to get it working. And right now we don't have landing spots for it at either end. And this is the key. Before most bridges are built, there's a ferry system working. And I think that getting the ferry in operation, putting it to work, is key to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Darcy Salmon, same question for you, sir. How are you going to work with Anchorage to help make these two projects happen?
Well, when I was the mayor, the reason that the ferry and the bridge and the port all came into fruition is because of the working relationship that we did have with Anchorage under Mayor Maestrom. We went there with my manager, Mike Scott, and we promoted the idea, and he actually went to Washington, D.C. with us to Senator Stevens' office, who at that time was the head of the Senate Budget Appropriations Committee. We presented the idea of the port to him with a ferry system in order to entice activity on our side of the inlet, such that, in his words, not mine, in 20 minutes, he said 3 times, if we get some activity on that side of the inlet, then we can build that bridge. If we get that activity on that side of the inlet, then we can build that bridge. David, how much, can we get that activity over there? Can we get that ferry? I can get Lockheed Martin to build that ferry for us. I know I can. This was in 1997. The port is there, Ted is gone, the ferry's built, Begich is come and gone, Salt Creek's come and gone, Flynn's come and gone. Flynn's still there, I take that back, claiming. And so the stage is set with Mayor Sullivan, who's once again in favor of the port. He's in favor of the bridge, and he's in favor of development and relationship with our side. That's integral. The relationship between Anchorage administration and our administration. that'll get the wheel started and we're in play. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Darcy Salmon. Mr. Steve Colligan, same question for you, sir. How will you work with Anchorage to make sure these two projects move forward?
Well, again, just like the prison, I think this has an element of political theater to it. I've talked to Mayor Dan Sullivan and the administration and understand that the reality is they filed a lawsuit to protect their interest, to document some engineering changes that they wanted on that side of the port to make sure that when they move forward, their concerns and design requirements were taken into consideration. Beyond that, I think Cabada is moving on its way. Ideally, you would start with a ferry and move to a road design. Unfortunately, our ferry is a DOD ferry. It's very complicated, very sophisticated, and I'm not sure that we want to be in the business of running a ferry. I have talked recently to the governor and to the lieutenant governor about opportunities to lease the ferry out and use it for other unique requirements, even so that we don't have a stop on our side or in the anchor shop, that it can still be used or leased out. I think there are other opportunities. But right now, it is going to cost the taxpayer money. We either need to sell it, lease it, or find other opportunities for it.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the final question before we move into closing statements. We'll start this question with Mr. Darcy Salmon. Darcy, some would say that there are too many boards and commissions. Some would say that we just have exactly the right number, and some would say that we don't have enough. What would your answer be to the public involvement as far as boards and commissions go? Do we have too many? Do we have too few? Do we have the right number?
Well, we possibly have too few serving on too many. Part of the problem with boards and commissions is you get 10% of the people that do participate, and as a result, as I shared with you, a litany of the boards and commissions that I have and do currently sit on, I'm just one guy, and I'm tapped out. And when I am seated, if Lord willing I am seated, I'm going to have to give up some of these boards and commissions because our assembly seat has become a full-time job in so many words in relationship to my earning a living and running the assembly. I'm going to have to step down. But Ross Perot was famous when he ran for president, saying that when you see a snake, you kill it. You don't create a committee on snakes. And so it has to be analyzed, looked over, which ones are productive, which ones are not productive. I was sat in on an assembly meeting where there was an argument over removing one or something, and it had 6 empty seats out of 11 for an extended period of time, and apparently nobody wanted to serve on that one. So I think that's self-evident that that one did and should have gone its way. So they all have to be re-examined, analyzed, looked over, keep the ones that are productive and get rid of those that are really someone's, as Steve puts it, special interests. Work with the ones we need.
Thank you very much, Darcy Salmon. We'll now ask Steve Colligan the same question, sir. Do you think there are too many boards and commissions, or they're just about the right number, or they're not enough?
That I do not know at the moment, honestly, but I did attend the Matthew Borough's workshop for the Assembly and Administration this summer, where it was identified as one of their key issues to be looked at, to review all boards and commissions. Are they necessary? Are they doing the job? Are they doing within the scope of each board? I think there's several boards that don't have the people on them. They aren't populated, so they don't even have a quorum to meet. And also they start making decisions that are outside the scope of what that board is really supposed to be doing. So I support evaluating that, determining which boards and commissions, and or do they just need to be restructured and changed so that they are effective. The bottom line is I think boards and commissions provide a value to the borough and an expertise from the public, hopefully business people and people that have experience in those areas to support the borough, but are they effective?
Thank you very much, candidate Steve Colligan. We'll now ask Pat Johnson the same question, sir. Are there too many boards and commissions, just about the right number, not enough?
I think that there's just about the right amount. It's been my pleasure to serve for the last 9 years on some of these boards and commissions and committees. And one of the things that I learned was that most of the good ideas come from the public. These boards and commissions provide a service in allowing public testimony and allow the boards